Advisor Show. My name is Jake Holter, and joining me for this episode is CPA Shelly Bykat, and she's going to help advisors understand better ways to communicate with CPAs.
Our mission at Resilient Advisor is to have a significant impact on the retirement crisis by educating and empowering financial advisors to better serve their clients. We bring you industry thought leaders and experts to help you make a difference in the lives of your clients. This show is sponsored by Capital Wealth Planning, providing covered call solutions for financial advisors. To learn more about their SMAs or ETF, visit capitalwealthplanning.com.
Shelly Bykat is a regular guest on the Resilient Advisor Show. She comes on to share her technical capabilities and ideas for financial advisors around tax planning. Today's episode, we're going to take a slightly different approach and talk about ways financial advisors can build relationships with CPAs, and just as important, how not to build relationships with CPAs. Shelly, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
All right. So let's start with kind of a general context. And we had a great conversation pre-show about your thoughts around this. What are the wrong ways to approach CPAs?
So what happens a lot of times for me is I'll be introduced to a financial advisor and they immediately start telling me about their company, what they do, what services they provide. They want to sell me immediately on their company. That is the wrong approach.
Yep.
It's
So I can tell you, I have actually noticed that with the show. People will reach out because they want to come on, and immediately they're pitching the value to them for being on the show and not talking about it in win-win terms, right?
Right. Absolutely. They do it. It's funny. It's like they wanted to explain to me about their companies. And I'm thinking to myself, I know 1,000 financial advisors. We need to work together and develop a relationship. Don't try to tell me about your company. That's not helpful to me. It doesn't make me want to run out and throw business your way.
Yeah. And I'm guessing it's a standard process where they have a list of CPAs in the area. They probably reach out and say, hey, Shelly, I'd like to take you out to coffee and tell you about my business.
Yes, I've had that. I've had, hey, will you come to my office and let me do a video or presentation for you? No. Okay. And I've actually sat through those. I've actually sat through lunches. I've sat through coffees. I've gone to the offices, and I've determined after over 20 years in the business, I'm not doing that anymore. And I have a relationship with 2 financial advisors at this point in my career. 2. So I have a lot of clients with a lot of financial advisors. I'm not in relationship with them, though. It's a difference.
You're in Atlanta, Georgia. You specialize in small business owners. Which most of them all have, financial advisors associated with their household, and you only have 2 relationships.
That's right.
There's probably 5,000 advisors here in Atlanta. Why do you think that is?
Because they are constantly trying to sell themselves the minute you meet them. And I do think part of it is on the CPA. CPAs are difficult. Their personalities are tough. I know I've been in public accounting my entire career, and I've worked with the best of them. And CPAs are hard to kind of get in a conversation with. CPAs are insecure. They always want to prove how smart they are, and they really are constantly trying to do that within firms. They're not really kind to one another. So I do understand it from the financial advisor's perspective, but everybody, you build relationships with everybody in your life, doctors, teachers, if you have kids, there's everybody. It's no different with CPAs. And you don't immediately walk into a doctor's office and start bragging about what you do with investments, do you? Why would you do that with CPAs? Just because we have access to the clients? That doesn't make sense.
That's right.
But that's what happens.
You talk about the insecurities of CPAs. My father was a CPA for 40 plus years.
Maybe that's why we get along so well.
Maybe. He definitely was not insecure, but he had a very high BS meter. So he wasn't going to be sold something. He was always looking for the angle and somebody who was presenting to them. Do you think that's part of the dynamic where advisors have a challenge because they're coming in and pitching and pitching and pitching when trying to build relationships with CPAs?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Instead of, picking up the phone and maybe calling me, well, and typically you wouldn't cold call a CPA. What should happen is you should be working with a client and the client will introduce you to the CPA, right? That's your into the CPA. Mm-hmm. Then from there, you establish a relationship with that CPA. And then over time, hopefully that CPA and you will pass business back and forth. That's the way it works in my world.
All right. So let's extrapolate that a little bit. So you're a financial advisor. You have your 125, 150 households that you're serving. If you haven't been through the process of connecting with their CPAs, you want to start a process of reaching out. What does that initial communication look like?
So I would literally pick up the phone and call the CPA. And because the CPA is the same, you all have a mutual client, they're going to take your phone call. So pick up the phone, introduce yourself, and just say, hey, I'm here. I work with the client. If there's ever anything you need, let me know. That's it. You don't have to go into this, I do this or you do that, but you've established goodwill by picking up the phone and introducing yourself and letting the CPA know that you're out there. That's all you're doing.
So some of the canned marketing programs out there that are supposedly designed to help advisors connect with CPAs would then tell you want to schedule a series of meetings with them. And each one building on, yeah. And people pay $10,000 for these things. And each meeting builds on their capabilities. And then at the end of the series of meetings, they're asking for some type of exclusive agreement with the CPA.
Yeah, no.
This works. Have you ever seen that work?
No, I mean, I would never, first of all, I would never give a financial advisor that much of my time. I wouldn't keep having meetings over and over. What should happen is you're working on a client's book, you're working on their investments. Let's say you want to, balance their portfolio. Pick up the phone and call the CPA and just say, hey, I'm thinking about selling some stocks. Do you have any thoughts? That's it. Just develop a relationship that way. And chances are when you get on the phone with them, you can say, hey, how is busy season? Or, hey, how are the kids? Or did you see that golf match or this football game? I mean, you just talk about real life stuff and it doesn't have to be long, but you start to develop a relationship. And if you're smart, you might ask a tax question because CPAs love to talk about taxes and they will explain it to you. So that's how you get in relationship. If your goal is to constantly call a CPA and say, hey, meet me, and then you sit and you talk about yourself for 30 minutes, that would not go anywhere for me. Yep. I mean, it just, what good does that do me? Yep. All I think is that you're a born salesman and you're not really interested in helping the clients. Your goal is to help the client. And if you get to know the financial advisor, if the CPA gets to know the financial advisor, as clients come along and they need, someone to work with, if they know your personality and think you'll be a good fit, that's when the referrals start to fly.
I would also think, Shelly, the advisors taking that approach are usually not telling a differentiated story, meaning the person from one firm, whether it's an independent shop or a big firm like a UBS or Merrill Lynch, they're not really sitting in front of the CPA and telling a story that's different from the next one, generally speaking. Have you heard any in your years of listening to financial advisors, someone tell you a story that sounded different?
What I've noticed with the advisors that I have relationships with, they're really centered on, they're very focused on the client and serving the clients and helping the clients. So what they do is they'll call me and say, hey, we're looking at doing this. Do you have any thoughts on it? I've had them call me. A lot of times it centers around mortgage, paying off the home mortgage and how that affects taxes. And we sort of talk through all of that. Or, if a client's selling a business, hey, let's talk through how all of this is going to work in the investment world. So I think if you're focused on the clients and serving the clients and then having communication, open communication with the CPA, that's where you're really adding the value. That's how the CPA gets to know you. And that's how the relationship starts to form. It's not going on and on about how you do this and how you do that. I'm not really interested in how you are investing. That's not that. It's the client's responsibility to hire you based on your investment, not me. Mm-hmm. If people are looking for advice, I'll say, hey, go talk to these people.
Yep. So Shelly, is it prudent for a financial advisor to try and stay out of the way when working with the CPA on tax issues? Or do you prefer an advisor who understands what's going on in the tax return and them asking questions not about your work, but to learn about the client's situation?
I love it when the advisor wants to understand the tax situation. It's great because you can sit down, you can have a conversation with the advisor, with the client. And then the other thing that is effective is the advisor gets more face time with the client. Because a lot of times what happens is, and I've heard this complaint from advisors before, well, you have an annual deadline, so you get to see the client and talk to the client, whereas I have to schedule a meeting, and it's easy for my meeting to get pushed back because there's no deadline. Well, if the advisor was smart, what they would do is they kind of put themselves in the middle of it and sit down with the client, go through their tax documents with them, help them fill out their tax organizer. Schedule meetings. I know a client, I'm working with an advisor now and a client, and we did a big meeting, and the advisor said, oh, I'll follow up with this. It's great for me to do it because my billing rate's less than yours. It's a big joke because, we bill by the hour, and they're just, their fees are based on the value of their assets, right? So it's a great opportunity for the advisor to help the client communicate with me, the follow-up, and then they also learn about the client's financial world and can stay involved. So it's a brilliant strategy.
Mm-hmm. So what are your thoughts around advisors boning up on the tax preparation and planning in the relationship? And here's the context for that. So you and I have talked in the past about how most financial advisors, they don't understand a tax return and they don't understand the applications of the decisions that they're making generally. So when an advisor thinks, okay, I want to have a deeper understanding of it, there are places they could go. It could be part of the CFP curriculum. There are third-party vendors right now, like over on kitsis.com. They have a 6-hour course where you can get an in-depth view on how to look at a client's income tax statement to better serve that client. Shelly, is that type of advisor that's seeking that type of education a threat to what you do, or is it something that makes them a better partner? And how could they then use that as a tool to work better with a CPA?
Oh, I think it's a great idea for them to learn how to read a tax return because I think, again, the goal is to serve the client. So if an advisor can pick up the tax return and look at the tax return and kind of read what the tax return is telling them, they add value to the client. That's not a threat to me. There's tons of clients out there. Everybody has to have a tax return. That helps me. I mean, they might see things, they might know things in the client's world that I don't know. They can pick up the phone and call me. Hey, I think we should do this for the client. What do you think? I think it's great. I love when clients email me or when advisors call me or whatever and say, hey, how does this work from a tax perspective? I had an advisor email me the other day and send me a screenshot from one of his clients' tax returns, not my client, his client, and say, hey, can you explain this to me? We think the return is wrong. And I took the 5 minutes that it took to look at what was on the tax return and email him back and say, oh, well, this is what it's telling me. He loved it. It builds goodwill for me because I'm willing to help. He's learning how to read the tax return, which means he's providing value to his client and future clients. So it's a win-win for everyone. There's no reason to be threatened by that stuff. The more knowledge you have, the more it helps the client. And the end goal is to serve the client.
Yep, that's right, Shelly. So Shelly, what are some of the best practices you've seen for financial advisors who are making an introduction to a CPA of one of their clients when they don't already have a pre-existing relationship?
You mean either via telephone or email? Is that
what's the best one?
Well, I think that I get a lot of email referrals, or the client will just call me and say, hey, so and so referred you to me. But I think if your goal is to be in relationship with the CPA, it's really smart. Just pick up the phone. Hey, I'm sending this client to you. Let me give you a little background information. I love it because then then when the client calls, I've already kind of got a little background information and I can start asking the questions I need to ask. It also gets me on the phone with the financial advisor. It builds goodwill because they're sending me a client. I'm learning more about what they offer with their clients and what they're doing with their clients. So I think it's a smarter play to pick up the phone and call. And they'll take your phone call if you're sending a business, right? So, and your goal is to be in relationship with the CPA. That's the way to go about it, in my opinion.
One of the gripes I hear from financial advisors who've done that consistently with one or two CPAs and they have not seen any referrals back is that, hey, all I'm doing is sending them business and I don't see anything coming back. Based on your experience looking at other CPAs, what do you think the disconnect there is? And should the financial advisor at some point just stop sending those referrals and look for other people to partner with?
Well, I think if the CPA is doing a good job and taking care of the client, then I think that's kind of up to you. I think the other thing to consider is that a lot of CPAs get their referrals from financial advisors. So there might not be as many opportunities to pass clients, but when there are, they'll probably pick up the phone, or maybe they're not in good relationship, and that's why they're not getting the referrals. It just depends. It just depends. I do think though, a lot of my business comes from from financial advisor referrals. So, most of my clients already have financial advisors when they come to me. I don't necessarily have a relationship with them, but I know that they're out there. So I do think it's tough. I think that the goal is to get in relationship with CPAs.
Excellent. That's the big takeaway from this episode, in my opinion. It's building the relationship in a genuine way, not pitching your story. Shelly, I appreciate you coming on and sharing this. I know that our next quarter's CPA Corner with Shelly Bykat, we will get back to technical issues. If something passes in Congress, I think we're going to have a whole lot to think about, don't you?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
All right. Shelly, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you.